My grandfather left me his vintage Mustang, a car we spent 10 years restoring together. When my golden child brother demanded it for college, my parents stole it from my driveway while I was at work. They expected me to surrender. Instead, I reported it stolen. Before we begin today's story, we have an urgent announcement. Due to technical issues, this channel is shutting down. But don't worry, the stories continue. Please subscribe to our new channel, Daily Drip Stories. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag on this video. Make sure to switch over now so you don't miss out. Thank you for your support. Now back to the story. The silence of the driveway was louder than any scream I could have managed. I stood there, my work boots heavy on the concrete, clutching my keys so hard the jagged metal bit into my palm. It was a physical blow, a punch to the gut that left me breathless and reeling. The oil stain was still there. The phantom outline of the tires where I had parked it 12 hours ago was still visible in the dust. But the car, my car, the 1967 Mustang Fastback in Acapulco blue that I had poured my soul into, was gone. My first instinct wasn't to think of thieves. A thief would have taken the neighbor's Lexus. It was newer, easier to fence, and didn't have a tricky clutch that required a specific, loving touch to engage. No, a thief wouldn't know how to start the Bluebird without flooding the carburetor. My stomach churned with a nauseating mix of bile and betrayal. I knew exactly who had taken it. I dropped my bag right there on the pavement, the tools inside clanking together with a dull, heavy sound. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a cold, rising fury that started in my chest and spread to my fingertips. I pulled out my phone. I didn't dial 911, not yet. I dialed the number of the house I grew up in. It rang 4 times before my father, Roman, picked up. "Hello, Riley?" His voice was casual, too casual. It was the voice of a man who was pretending the world was spinning on its normal axis, while fully aware he had just tilted mine off a cliff. "Where is it?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady, though it sounded foreign to my own ears. "Where is what? You need to be more specific, honey. I'm in the middle of dinner," Roman said. I could hear the clink of silverware in the background. The normalcy of it made me want to vomit. "The Mustang," I said, closing my eyes. "The car Grandpa gave me, the car that is titled in my name. It's gone. Tell me you didn't do what I think you did." There was a pause on the line, a heavy silence where I could practically hear him exchanging a look with my mother, Maria. Then, a sigh. The patronizing, heavy sigh he used when I was a toddler throwing a tantrum. "Riley, listen to me," Roman began, his tone shifting to that smooth, sales pitch cadence he used on his real estate clients. "We didn't want to make a big scene out of this. Kyle left for campus this afternoon. He needed reliable transportation. We made an executive decision as a family." "You stole my car," I whispered. "We reallocated a family asset," he corrected sharply. "Kyle is going to a prestigious university. He needs to make a certain impression. That car fits the image he needs. You have your truck for work. You don't need the Mustang. You just like having it. There's a difference." "It's not a family asset," I gritted out. "It's mine. Grandpa left it to me, legally, exclusively." "Oh, stop with the legal nonsense," Roman snapped, his patience evaporating. "We are your parents. We know what's best. Kyle will bring it back during semester breaks. Stop being selfish and support your brother's future for once. We're done discussing this." The line went dead. I lowered the phone, staring at the black screen. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. It was a complete erasure of my identity, my rights, and my grief. They hadn't just taken a vehicle. They had taken the physical embodiment of the only person who had ever truly seen me. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my phone. I just stood there in the growing darkness of the early autumn evening, the cool wind biting through my mechanic's coveralls. My body felt heavy, like I was moving through water. I walked into my small rental house, the silence amplifying the ringing in my ears. I went to the kitchen sink and splashed cold water on my face, trying to scrub away the feeling of helplessness. They thought this was over. That was the thing about Roman and Maria, and by extension, Kyle. They operated on a distinct frequency of reality where their desires automatically overwrote everyone else's boundaries. In their minds, the conversation we just had was the final word. Roman had issued a decree, Maria had likely nodded in agreement while serving the roast chicken, and I was expected to play my role, the grumbling but ultimately compliant daughter. I sat down at my kitchen table, my hands clasped together. I replayed the conversation. Kyle is going to a prestigious university. He needs to make a certain impression. That was it. That was the core of it. Appearance. Status. To them, the Mustang was a prop. It was a cool vintage accessory that would help Kyle pledge the right fraternity or impress the right girls. They saw the shiny blue paint and the chrome bumper. They didn't see the nights I spent scrubbing rust off the undercarriage until my knuckles bled. They didn't see the weekend's grandpa, and I spent rebuilding the transmission, piece by agonizing piece. They didn't know that the engine had a specific hum that sounded like a heartbeat to me. I pulled out my laptop and opened a folder titled Bluebird Documentation. Inside were scanned copies of everything. The original title transfer, signed by my grandfather 3 days before he passed. The registration, fully in my name. The insurance policy, paid for by me. Roman, in his arrogance, assumed that because he was dad, his authority superseded state law. He assumed that because I was his daughter, I wouldn't dare escalate things beyond a few angry phone calls. I looked at the clock. 7:15 p.m. Kyle would be driving on the interstate right now, likely pushing 80 miles per hour, grinning like he owned the world. He probably had the windows down, the radio blasting, completely oblivious to the fact that he was driving a felony. My phone buzzed again, a text from Maria. Riley, please don't be difficult about this. Your father is very stressed with the market right now. Kyle is so happy. Let him have this moment. We can talk about you getting the car back in the spring. Love you. The manipulation was so practiced, so smooth. Don't be difficult. As if being the victim of theft was a personality flaw. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened a specific app on my phone. When I restored the Mustang, I had modernized the electrical system. I did it subtly, hiding the wiring harnesses under the original dashboard so the vintage look remained untouched. But deep inside the chassis, welded behind the rear seat where no casual observer would ever look, I had installed a high-end GPS tracker with a remote kill switch. I hadn't done it because I feared my family. I did it because classic cars are targets for professional thieves. I watched the little blue dot moving steadily west on I-95. You forgot one thing, I whispered to the empty room, a cold calm settling over me. You think you took a car. You don't realize you took a piece of evidence. They thought they were dealing with the daughter who used to cry when they canceled her birthday plans to celebrate Kyle's soccer awards. They didn't realize they were dealing with a master mechanic who knew exactly how to dismantle a machine or a family, bolt by bolt. To understand why this betrayal cut so deep, you have to understand the dynamic of the house I grew up in. I was the mistake. Kyle was the miracle. I was born when Roman and Maria were barely 20, struggling and unprepared. Kyle came 5 years later when Roman's real estate career had taken off and Maria had settled into her role as a school administrator. Kyle was the golden child. He was charming, handsome, and athletic. He was the sun around which our family orbited. If Kyle wanted pizza, we had pizza. If Kyle had a game, we canceled our plans to watch him sit on the bench. If Kyle broke a vase, it was an accident. If I broke a vase, I was clumsy and careless. I wasn't athletic. I wasn't charming in the way they wanted. I was quiet, observant, and I liked to take things apart. My grandfather, my mother's father, was the only one who didn't look at me like I was a puzzle with missing pieces. He was a retired engineer with a garage full of tools and a heart full of patience. When I was 12, I started spending every weekend at his place. While Kyle was at specialized sports camps that cost thousands of dollars, I was covered in grease, learning the difference between a wrench and a ratchet. Grandpa didn't treat me like a girl who should be playing with dolls, and he didn't treat me like a disappointment. He treated me like an apprentice. "Riley," he told me once, wiping his hands on a rag, "the world is full of people who only know how to break things. Be one of the few who knows how to fix them." The Mustang was his pride and joy. It had sat in his barn for 20 years, a rusted shell of its former glory. When I turned 16, he made me a deal. If I helped him restore it, really restore it, not just pay someone else to do it, it would be mine when he was gone. For 4 years, that car was my life. I learned patience. I learned physics. I learned that you can't force a bolt that isn't ready to turn, or you'll shear the head off. I missed proms, I missed football games, I missed family bonding trips that were really just shrines to Kyle's ego. I was in the garage. When Grandpa died last year, the car wasn't just a vehicle. It was a vessel for my grief. It was the place I went to talk to him. Roman and Maria never understood that. To Roman, the car was a dollar sign, a classic asset that was appreciating in value. He had hinted a few times that we should sell it to pay for Kyle's tuition, but I had shut him down, brandishing the will and the title. He had backed off, but the resentment simmered. And then there was Kyle. Kyle, at 19, was a carbon copy of Roman but without the work ethic. He was going to college to study business, which mostly seemed to mean rushing the top fraternity and partying. He had wrecked 2 cars in high school, both brand new, both gifts from our parents. He viewed vehicles as disposable appliances. A week ago, Kyle had come by my place. He walked around the Mustang, kicking the tires lightly. "You know, Rye," he said, leaning against the door, something I hated. "This car is wasted on you. You just drive it to work and back. Imagine me rolling up to the freshman mixer in this. It's a panty dropper for sure." "Don't call it that," I snapped, wiping a smudge off the fender. "And it's not yours, it never will be." "Mom and Dad think it's unfair," he said, his voice taking on that whining edge. "I'm going away, I need a car, you have your truck, we're family, you should want to help me." "I helped you pass algebra," I said. "That was enough." He had laughed then, a cold, dismissive sound. "You're so stingy, it's just a car. Grandpa is dead, he doesn't care who drives it." That was the moment I knew he was dangerous. Not physically, but emotionally. He had no reverence for the labor, the history, or the love that went into the machine. He just wanted the shine. Now, as I sat in my kitchen watching the GPS dot move closer to the state line, I realized Roman and Maria had been planning this. They waited until I was on a 12-hour shift at the restoration shop. They probably had a locksmith come out, or maybe they found the spare key I kept in the magnetic box under the wheel well. A secret I had foolishly shared with my father years ago in case of emergency. They thought they had won. They thought the hierarchy was restored, Kyle on top, receiving the spoils, and Riley at the bottom, absorbing the loss. But they were looking at the Riley of 5 years ago. They didn't know the Riley who negotiated parts prices with sharks, who managed project timelines, and who understood that in the mechanical world, actions had direct, measurable consequences. I wasn't going to call them back and beg. I wasn't going to drive over and scream. I picked up my phone and dialed the non-emergency line for the police department. "Police dispatch," a voice answered. "I need to report a grand theft auto," I said, my voice dead calm. "I have the location of the vehicle, the identity of the suspect, and proof of ownership. I'd like to press charges." The police station lobby was fluorescent bright and smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. It was a stark contrast to the warm, grease-scented air of my grandfather's garage, the place where I felt most at home. Here, I felt exposed. I sat on a hard plastic chair, my folder of documents clutched to my chest. I had to wait 20 minutes before an officer was available. Those 20 minutes were the longest of my life. Every instinct I had been raised with, the instinct to protect the family, to keep secrets, to absorb pain so my parents wouldn't be inconvenienced, was screaming at me to stand up and walk out. Just let him have it. A voice that sounded like my mother whispered in my head. Is a car worth destroying your brother's future? Then I remembered the oil stain on the driveway. I remembered the way Roman had actually laughed, when I asked where my property was. Ms. Bennett. I looked up, a tall officer with graying hair and a name tag reading SGT. Miller stood by the door. He looked tired. That's me, I said, standing up. My legs felt like jelly, but I forced them to hold me. I followed him to a small desk in the back. He sat down and opened a notepad, looking at me with that weary skepticism law enforcement reserves for domestic disputes. So, dispatch says your brother took your car? Miller asked, clicking his pen. Ms. Bennett, I have to be honest with you up front. If you gave him the keys, or if this is a dispute about who owns the car in a divorce or inheritance battle, this is a civil matter. We can't get involved. I didn't give him the keys, I said, my voice gaining strength. I was at work. My parents, who live 10 miles away, came to my house, entered my property, took the spare key from a hidden location I had previously disclosed to them for emergencies only, and gave the vehicle to my brother. I opened my folder. I laid the documents out on the desk with the precision of a blackjack dealer. This is the title, I said, pointing to the document. Sole owner, Riley Bennett, no Lee. Ends, no co-signers. This is the probate court order from my grandfather's will, transferring the asset specifically to me last year. And this, I pulled out a printed screenshot of the text message I had received an hour ago, is an admission of guilt from my father, stating they reallocated the asset without my consent. Miller picked up the title, examining the watermark. He read the text message. His eyebrows went up. Okay, he said, his tone shifting from dismissive to professional. That changes things. If you didn't authorize the use, it's unauthorized use of a motor vehicle at the very least, given the value of a '67 Mustang. It's appraised at $45,000, I interjected, sliding the insurance appraisal across the desk. That's grand larceny, Miller finished. That's a felony. He looked me in the eye. If we go down this road, Ms. Bennett, and we find the vehicle, your brother will be arrested. The district attorney picks up the charges. You can't just decide to drop them later because your mom calls you crying. Once the train leaves the station, it doesn't come back. Are you sure you want to do this? I thought about Kyle kicking the tires. I thought about him calling me stingy. I thought about the sheer entitlement of stripping me of the one thing I loved because they decided I didn't need it. I want to report my car stolen, I said clearly. I want to press charges against whoever is driving it. All right, Miller said, typing into his computer. We'll put out a bolo, be on the lookout. Do you have any idea where he might be heading? I know exactly where he is, I said. I pulled out my phone and opened the GPS app. The blue dot was moving along Route 80, about 60 miles away. He was making good time. He's approaching the crossover near Stanton. There's a rest area about 2 miles ahead of him. He'll probably stop. He has a small bladder. Miller looked at the phone screen. That's helpful. We can alert highway patrol in that sector. I can do more than that, I said. My finger hovered over a red icon on the screen labeled Immobilize. This was the feature I had paid extra for. It was designed for carjackings. It wouldn't cut the engine while the car was moving at speed. That was a safety liability. But the moment the car came to a complete stop and the ignition was turned off, the system would disengage the starter relay and cut the fuel pump circuit. The car would be a 2-ton paperweight until I unlocked it. He's slowing down, I noted, watching the speed readout drop. 60-40-20. He stopped, probably at the rest stop. I tapped the red button. The app asked, confirm immobilization. I tapped yes. The screen flashed, target disabled. He's not going anywhere, I told Officer Miller. The car is dead. He's sitting at the Stanton rest area, probably wondering why it won't start again. Miller picked up his radio. Dispatch, this is Miller. I have a location on that 1016. Stanton rest area westbound. Vehicle is disabled. Suspect is on scene. I sat back in the chair. My hands were trembling again, but this time, it wasn't from rage. It was the adrenaline of pulling the trigger. The trap was sprung. 40 minutes, that's how long it took. I was still at the station, filling out a formal written statement when my phone erupted. It wasn't a text this time, it was a call from Kyle. I looked at Officer Miller. "Answer it," Miller said softly. "Put it on speaker, but don't say anything about where you are, just let him talk." I tapped the green button and set the phone on the desk between us. "Riley," Kyle's voice was high-pitched, bordering on hysterical. "Riley, pick up. What is wrong with this piece of junk?" "What's going on, Kyle?" I asked calmly. "The car, I stopped for a burger and now it won't start. It's completely dead. It's not cranking, nothing. I'm stuck at this creepy rest stop and it's getting dark. You need to tell me how to fix it. Is there a trick?" "Dad said there's a trick with the clutch." "There's no trick," I said. "It's a reliable car, unless it's been tampered with." "I didn't tamper with it," he screamed. "I just drove it. God, you give me this car and it breaks down 2 hours in. You probably did this on purpose. Dad is going to be so pissed at you for giving me a lemon." The audacity was breathtaking. He steals my car, and I'm the villain because it broke down. "Where are you, Kyle's?" "I told you, the Stanton rest area. Look, just call AAA or something. I don't have the membership card. Send a tow truck. And hurry up, I have a mixer tonight." "I can't send AAA, Kyle," I said. "I'm not the one with the car." "What is wrong with you?" he shouted. "Why are you being such a—" He cut off abruptly. In the background, through the tinny speaker, I heard a new sound, the distinct, chirping whoop-whoop of a siren. Then, the crunch of gravel as a heavy vehicle pulled up close. "Oh great," Kyle muttered. "A cop, he can jump it. Hang on." I heard the fumbling of the phone, then Kyle's muffled voice. "Hey, officer, yeah, my car died. Can you help me?" "Step away from the vehicle, son," a deep voice commanded in the background. It wasn't friendly. "What? It's just broken down," Kyle said, sounding confused. I said step away from the vehicle, turn around and place your hands on the roof. Now. "Riley," Kyle's voice cracked, pure fear seeping in. "Riley, what's happening?" "You're being arrested, Kyle," I said, leaning closer to the phone. "For grand theft auto." "What? No, it's my sister's car. My parents gave it to me. Riley, tell him it's okay." "I reported it stolen," I said, "because it was." The line went dead, as the phone was likely pulled from his hand or dropped. I looked at Officer Miller. He nodded slowly. "Sounds like they got him." The silence that followed was short-lived. 2 minutes later, Roman called. I didn't put this one on speaker, but I kept the volume high enough for Miller to hear the tone. "What have you done?" Roman roared. He wasn't using his smooth realtor voice anymore. He was screaming so loud the microphone was distorting. "Kyle just called me from the back of a police cruiser. He's being arrested. They're impounding the Mustang." "I know," I said. "I told you, Dad, it's my car, you took it, that's theft." "He is your brother," Roman bellowed. "You have ruined his life. Do you understand what a felony charge does to a college student? He'll be expelled before he even starts. You call them right now and tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you lent it to him and forgot." "I can't do that," I said. "That would be filing a false police report. That's also a crime." "I don't care about the law," Roman shouted. "We are family. You fix this, Riley. You fix this right now, or so help me God." "Or what?" I interrupted, my voice finally rising, snapping the leash of my control. "Or what, Dad? You'll take my car? You already did. You'll cut me off. I pay my own rent. I pay for my own food. I fixed that car with my own money. You have nothing on me anymore." "You are ungrateful," he hissed, "after everything we did for you." "You didn't do anything for me," I said. "You did everything for Kyle, and look where it got him. He's in handcuffs because you taught him he could take whatever he wanted." "We are coming to the station," Roman said, his voice dropping to a menacing low. "We are going to straighten this out, and you are going to tell the truth that you are a vindictive, jealous little girl who gave him the keys." "Come on down," I said. I'm sure Officer Miller would love to hear your version of events, especially since I have the text messages where you admitted to taking it while I was at work. I hung up. Officer Miller looked at me. They're coming here. Yes, I said. Good, Miller said, standing up and hitching his belt. I'll have a couple of deputies waiting in the lobby. If they try to intimidate a witness in a police station, they're going to have a very bad night. My parents arrived at the station 45 minutes later, looking like a storm front rolling in. Roman was red-faced, veins bulging in his neck. Maria was pale, her eyes rimmed with red, looking like a tragic martyr. They spotted me sitting in the waiting area. I wasn't alone anymore. Officer Miller and another officer were standing casually nearby, leaning against the front desk, watching. Roman marched straight toward me, his finger raised like a weapon. You, he spat. You call the district attorney right now. You tell them you're dropping this. Sir, Officer Miller stepped forward, interposing himself between Roman and me. Step back. You're in a police station. Lower your voice. Roman stopped, blinking as if realizing where he was. He turned his charm on, but it was fractured, desperate. Officer, this is a terrible misunderstanding. My daughter, she's emotionally unstable. She gets confused. We have an agreement regarding the vehicle. It's a family car. That's not what the title says, Miller said calmly. And that's not what the text messages say. The title, Maria spoke up, her voice trembling. She fumbled in her oversized purse. We have the transfer papers. We signed them last week. Riley agreed to sign it over to Kyle for his graduation. She must have forgotten. She pulled out a crumpled piece of paper and thrust it at the officer. My blood ran cold. Signed them last week. Miller took the paper. He looked at it, then looked at me. Is this your signature, Ms. Bennett? I stood up and looked at the document. It was a DMV transfer form. At the bottom, in shaky blue ink, was a signature that read Riley Bennett. No, I said, staring at Maria. That's not my signature. That's Mom's handwriting trying to look like mine. Look at the R. I loop my R's. She slants hers. I looked at my mother, truly seeing her for the first time. It wasn't just entitled. It meant it was criminal delusion. You forged my signature. You forged a legal document to cover your tracks. We didn't forge it, Maria cried, tears spilling over. You said we could have it. We helped you with the paperwork because you're always so busy at that shop. That is forgery in the second degree, Miller said, his voice hardening instantly. And uttering a forged instrument. Ma'am, did you just hand me a forged government document to try and impede a criminal investigation? Maria's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Roman stepped in, putting a hand on her shoulder. Now, hold on. We're just saying there was a verbal agreement. There was no agreement, I said, cutting him off. And now I see why you were so confident. You weren't just going to borrow the car. You were going to steal the title too. You were going to transfer it to Kyle's name behind my back so I couldn't report it. I turned to Miller. I'd like to add forgery and fraud to the complaint. You can't do this, Roman shouted, lunging slightly before the second officer stepped forward, hand resting on his taser. He's your brother. He's sitting in a cell right now. He's terrified. He should be, I said. He was driving a stolen car with a forged title. We're going to sue you, Roman threatened, his eyes wild. We'll sue you for emotional distress. We'll cut you out of the will. You'll never see a dime from us. I don't want your money, I said. I want my car, and I want to be left alone. You're dead to us, Maria whispered, the venom in her voice shocking me. If Kyle doesn't get into that school because of this, you are dead to us. I was dead to you the moment I wasn't useful, I replied. The officers separated us then. Roman and Maria were taken into an interview room, not voluntarily, this time, but to be questioned about the document Maria had just foolishly produced. They had walked into the station to bully their daughter and had instead handed the police the final nail for their own coffin. I sat back down, alone again. My phone buzzed. It was an email notification from my bank. Alert, joint account balance low. I frowned. I had a small savings account that my parents had opened for me when I was a minor. I rarely used it, keeping it as an emergency fund. I logged in. The balance was 0. I scrolled through the transaction history. A transfer had been made 3 hours ago. Transfer to Kyle Bennett Tuition Fund. They had drained my emergency fund, $5,000. The escalating stakes weren't just about the car anymore. They had declared total war. They stole my car, they forged my signature, and now they had emptied my bank account to pay for the lawyer they were undoubtedly going to need for Kyle. I felt a cold smile touch my lips. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a mechanic who realizes that the engine isn't just broken, it's scrap metal. And there's no point in being gentle with scrap metal. I stood up and walked over to Officer Miller, who had just stepped out of the interview room. "Officer," I said, "I have one more crime to report." The fallout was immediate, but it wasn't the end. It was merely the bell ringing for the final round. My parents were released on bail the next morning. The charges were heavy: grand larceny for Roman, forgery and fraud for Maria, and the theft of funds from the joint account which I had added to the pile. But Roman was a man who believed he could talk his way out of a firing squad. He didn't go home to hide in shame. He went on the offensive. 2 days later, I received a summons. It wasn't from a court, but from Aunt Linda. Linda was Grandpa's younger sister, the matriarch of the extended family. She was a stern woman who hosted Thanksgiving and held the family history. The message was brief. Family meeting, Sunday, 2 p.m., be there, we need to settle this. I knew what it was. It was an ambush. A flying monkey convention where the entire extended clan would be gathered to pressure me into dropping the charges for the sake of the family. I could have refused. I could have stayed in my house with the doors locked. But I knew Roman. If I didn't show up, he would spin a narrative where I was the unstable, vindictive daughter who attacked her innocent brother. He would poison the well so thoroughly that I'd be a pariah in the town my grandfather helped build. I wasn't going to let him ruin Grandpa's name. I arrived at Linda's house at 2:00 p.m. sharp. My truck, my trusty, beat-up Silverado, looked out of place among the luxury sedans lining the driveway. When I walked into the living room, the air was so thick with tension it felt physical. Aunt Linda sat in her high-backed armchair. My cousins were scattered around the room, looking uncomfortable. And there, on the sofa, sat the holy trinity of victimhood: Roman, Maria, and Kyle. Kyle looked terrible. He was pale, unshaven, and staring at the floor. The arrest H. had clearly shaken the golden veneer off him. Roman and Maria, however, looked defiant. "She's here," Roman announced, standing up as if he were presiding over a board meeting. "Finally, now we can talk some sense." "Sit down, Riley," Aunt Linda said. Her voice was neutral, unreadable. I remained standing. "I'm comfortable, thanks." "Riley," Roman began, using his most reasonable, paternal voice. "We've been explaining the situation to everyone. How you've been under a lot of stress lately. How you misunderstood the arrangement with the car. We are willing to forgive this." Outburst. "We're willing to ask the DA to show leniency on your false report if you just sign a waiver admitting it was a misunderstanding." I stared at him. The sheer, unadulterated gall was almost impressive. "You want me to admit to a false report, so you can sue me later?" "We just want Kyle to go to college," Maria sobbed, clutching a tissue. "He's been suspended pending the investigation. His scholarship is at risk. How can you destroy your brother's future over a car?" A murmur of agreement went through the room. One of my cousins, Mike, spoke up. "Rye, come on, it's family. You don't call the cops on family. Maybe you overreacted." "Yeah," another aunt chimed in. "Kyle is just a kid. He made a mistake taking the car, but jail? That's extreme, Riley." I looked around the room. They didn't know. They only knew Roman's version, that I was jealous, that I had tacitly agreed to lend the car, and that I had snapped and called the police out of spite. I didn't call the police because he borrowed the car. I said, my voice cutting through the murmurs. I called the police because Roman and Maria stole it, and when they got caught, they didn't apologize. They doubled down. Lies, Roman shouted, his face reddening. We are your parents. We have a right to manage family assets. It's not a family asset, I said calmly. I reached into my bag. I didn't pull out a wrench this time. I pulled out a stack of paper. And neither was my bank account. I walked over to Aunt Linda and handed her the bank statements. Grandpa left me the Mustang because we built it together, I said to the room, but keeping my eyes on Roman. But he also told me to watch out for you, Dad. He told me you were a man who thought the world owed him a living. Don't you dare speak about him, Maria shrieked. He was my father. And he knew you better than anyone, I retorted. Aunt Linda, look at the last page. Linda adjusted her glasses. The room went silent. She read the line item. Transfer to Kyle Bennett Tuition Fund, $5,000, Linda read aloud. Authorized by Maria Bennett. That was my emergency fund, I said. Money I saved from my mechanic shifts. Money that was in a joint account from when I was 16 that I forgot to close. They didn't just take the car. When I got them arrested, they retaliated by draining my bank account to zero to pay for their lawyer. The mood in the room shifted instantly. Taking a car could be spun as a misunderstanding about sharing. Stealing cash from your daughter's savings account, that was theft, plain and simple. You took her money. Aunt Linda looked up, her expression darkening. Maria, you took Riley's savings. We needed it, Maria cried, her defense crumbling into hysteria. The lawyer wanted a retainer. Riley has a job, she can earn more, we have to save Kyle. So you stole from one child to pay for the other, Linda said. Her voice was ice cold. She looked at Roman. Is this true? It's family money, Roman blustered. We raised her, we fed her, she owes us. I don't owe you my livelihood, I said, and I don't owe you my silence. I turned to Kyle. He hadn't moved. He was staring at his parents with a look of dawning horror. And Kyle, I said, addressing him directly for the first time, you want to know why the car wouldn't start? I installed a kill switch. Because I knew, eventually, someone would try to take it. I just didn't think it would be my own brother. You shut it off, Kyle whispered. Yes, and I have the recording of you laughing about it, about how I was stingy, about how Grandpa didn't care. I played the audio file on my phone, the voicemail he had left a week prior, mocking my connection to the car. His voice, arrogant and cruel, filled the silent living room. It's just a car. Grandpa is dead. You're such a loser, Rye. Kyle shrank into the sofa. The golden child facade was shattered. Everyone in that room had revered Grandpa. Hearing Kyle dismiss him so callously was the final nail in the coffin. Aunt Linda stood up. She was a small woman, but in that moment she looked 10 feet tall. Get out, she said to Roman and Maria. Linda, please, Roman started. Get out, she repeated, pointing to the door. You steal from your daughter, you forge documents, you desecrate my brother's memory. You are not welcome in this house. Roman looked arrow. For support. He found none. My cousins looked away. The other aunts and uncles were glaring. The social capital he had banked on had just evaporated. He grabbed Maria's arm. Fine, we don't need you people. Come on, Kyle. Kyle stood up. He looked at his parents, then he looked at me. For a second, I thought he was going to apologize. I can't believe you did this, Kyle said to me, his voice trembling. You really hate me that much. I don't hate you, Kyle, I said, feeling a strange sense of pity for him. I just stopped setting myself on fire to keep you warm. He followed his parents out the door. The silence they left behind was heavy, but it was clean. The wheels of justice turned slowly, but they grind exceedingly fine. In the months that followed, the Bennett family drama became a matter of public record. With the bank records, the forged title, and the police report, the district attorney had a field day. Roman and Maria eventually took a plea deal to avoid prison time. They pleaded guilty to grand larceny and fraud. The terms were harsh: 3 years of probation, massive fines, and full restitution to me for the $5,000 plus legal fees. But the real punishment was the social exile. In our small town, news travels fast. Roman's real estate license was suspended due to the fraud conviction. Maria was forced to resign from her administrative position at the school. They lost their standing, their jobs, and their friends. Kyle didn't get off lightly either. The university rescinded his acceptance letter when the felony charge hit his record. He was given probation and community service, but his prestigious future was put on indefinite hold. I heard through the grapevine that he was working at a warehouse now, living in a small apartment because Roman and Maria had to downsize to pay their legal debts. As for me, I got the Mustang back 3 days after the meeting at Aunt Linda's. It was in the police impound lot, dusty and sad-looking. When I signed the release papers and walked out to it, my heart hammered in my chest. I was terrified they had wrecked it. I walked around it. There was a scratch on the rear bumper where the tow truck must have hooked it. The interior smelled faintly of Kyle's cheap body spray, but the body was straight. The engine was intact. I sat in the driver's seat and put the key in the ignition. I disengaged the kill switch via my phone. I turned the key. Vroom rumble rumble. The 289 V8 roared to life. It was a throatier, deeper sound than any modern car. It was the sound of history. It was the sound of Grandpa. I didn't drive it home immediately. I drove it to the cemetery. I parked on the narrow lane near the old oak tree where Grandpa was buried. I got out and sat on the hood, just like we used to sit on the tailgate of his truck during lunch breaks. "I got it back, Grandpa," I whispered to the wind. I thought I would feel guilty. I thought I would feel that old, familiar shame of being the problem child who caused a scene. But as I sat there, listening to the engine cool, hearing the ticking of the metal, I felt something else entirely. Peace. I had defended the one thing he had entrusted to me. I had drawn a line in the sand and defended my dignity. Aunt Linda pulled up a few minutes later. She had become a regular fixture in my life since the showdown, checking in on me, bringing over casseroles, and telling me stories about Grandpa I had never heard. She walked over and leaned against the car next to me. "She runs good," Linda said, patting the fender. "She runs great," I agreed. "You know," Linda said, looking at the headstone, "your grandfather was worried about you. He thought you were too soft. He thought you'd let them walk all over you forever." I looked down at my hands, mechanic's hands, scarred and strong. I almost did. "But you didn't," she said firmly. "You fixed the problem, just like he taught you." She reached into her purse and pulled out a check. "By the way, the restitution check from your parents came through the court today. It's in your mailbox, but I wanted to tell you. I'm proud of you, Riley." I felt a lump in my throat. I realized then that I hadn't lost my family. I had just pruned the rot away. The roots, the real roots like Aunt Linda and the memory of Grandpa, were still strong. "Come on," I said, hopping off the hood. "Let's go for a drive. I think this car needs to stretch its legs." Linda smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "I'd like that." We drove out of the cemetery and onto the open highway. I rolled the windows down, letting the cool autumn air rush in, blowing away the scent of cheap body spray and the lingering bitterness of the past. I shifted gears, the transmission engaging smoothly, the car responding to my touch like an extension of my own body. My brother was learning the hard way that status is earned, not given. My parents were learning that actions have consequences, and I was just driving. I was moving forward, looking through the windshield, leaving the rearview mirror for what it was meant for, glancing at what is behind you just to make sure it isn't gaining on you anymore. And as the sun set over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and violet, I pressed the accelerator. The bluebird flew, and finally, so did I.